Daniel Cooper sat in his enormous office on the 45th floor, staring at a photo on his desk. His 7-year-old daughter Sophie looked back at him with those big brown eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. 3 years had passed since the accident. 3 long years of watching his little girl slowly fade away like a flower without sunshine. He had everything money could buy. A penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sports cars he barely drove. A private jet collecting dust at the airport. But none of it mattered anymore. Not when he came home each evening to find Sophie sitting alone in her room, barely touching her dinner, speaking only in whispers. The nannies came and went like seasons. Some lasted a month, others just a week. Sophie wasn't rude to them, which almost made it worse. She was simply indifferent, as if they were just furniture in the house. She'd nod when they spoke, eat when they told her to, but there was no spark, no connection, no life in her eyes. Daniel's older sister Rebecca had been dropping hints for months. She needs a mother figure, she'd say during their weekly phone calls. Not just another nanny or tutor, someone who can actually be there for her emotionally. At first, Daniel had bristled at the suggestion. How could anyone replace his wife? How could he even think about moving on when his heart still ached every single day? But watching Sophie drift further away changed something in him. This wasn't about him anymore. This wasn't about his grief or his guilt or his memories. This was about a little girl who barely smiled, who had forgotten how to laugh, who was growing up in a house full of everything except the one thing she truly needed. One Tuesday evening, he came home early from work, something he'd been trying to do more often. He found Sophie in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the carpet with her school book spread around her. But she wasn't studying. She was just staring out the window at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, settling down beside her on the floor. "How was school today?" "Fine," she whispered, not looking at him. "Just fine? Nothing interesting happened?" She shrugged her small shoulders. "We learned about fractions." Daniel felt his heart squeeze. She used to come home bursting with stories, acting out her entire day with wild gestures and infectious giggles. Now every day was just fine. That night, after tucking Sophie into bed, Daniel sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. Rebecca's words echoed in his mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe Sophie needed more than what he could give her. He was trying his best, but clearly his best wasn't enough. The next morning, an idea struck him during his commute. Sophie attended Riverside Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in the city. The place was full of educated, accomplished people. Teachers, administrators, other parents. What if he got more involved there? He could volunteer, attend events, get to know the community. Maybe, just maybe, he'd meet someone suitable. Someone sophisticated and educated who could understand his world. Someone who could slowly become part of their lives. It wasn't about romance, he told himself. It was about finding the right person for Sophie. Someone cultured and refined. Someone who appreciated art and literature. Someone who could guide his daughter through life with grace and wisdom. He made some calls that very afternoon. By the end of the week, he'd arranged to join the school's parent volunteer committee. He donated a substantial amount to their library fund, which earned him an invitation to the next fundraising gala. He signed up to help with the upcoming science fair. He was all in. The first few weeks were exhausting. Daniel attended every school event on the calendar. Coffee mornings with other parents. Book fairs. Teacher appreciation luncheons. He made small talk with divorced mothers in expensive yoga outfits. He chatted with young teachers fresh out of graduate school. He met the art instructor, a woman in her 30s with a passion for impressionism. He had coffee with another parent, a successful lawyer who'd recently relocated to the city. Everyone was pleasant. Everyone was appropriate. Everyone checked all the boxes he'd mentally created. Educated, professional, well-spoken, sophisticated. But something felt off, like he was conducting job interviews rather than getting to know people. Meanwhile, Sophie remained the same. She went to school, came home, did her homework, ate her dinner, and went to bed. The routine never changed. The sadness never lifted. Daniel would ask about her day, and she'd give him the same one-word answers. Good. Fine. Okay. He tried introducing her to some of the women he'd met at school events. He'd casually mention them over dinner. "I met your art teacher today. Ms. Patterson seems very nice." Sophie would just nod and push her peas around her plate. One of the other parents, Mrs. Chen, said you did really well on your math test. Another nod. No interest. No reaction. 6 weeks into his mission, Daniel was starting to feel hopeless. He'd met dozens of perfectly suitable women, but none of them felt right. More importantly, none of them seemed to spark any interest in Sophie. And that was the whole point, wasn't it? This wasn't about him finding someone. This was about Sophie finding someone who could bring light back into her world. One Friday evening, he arrived at school to pick Sophie up from her after-school art club. He was running late because of a business call that had gone longer than expected. The hallways were quiet, most of the students already gone. He walked toward the art room, his expensive shoes clicking on the polished floors. That's when he heard it. Laughter. Real, genuine, bubbling laughter that made his steps falter. He knew that laugh. He'd heard it 1,000 times before his wife died, but not once in the 3 years since. It was Sophie's laugh. He followed the sound, his heart pounding. It was coming from one of the classrooms down the hall. He quickened his pace, almost jogging now, desperate to see what could possibly have brought that beautiful sound back into existence. The classroom door was open. Daniel stopped in the doorway, and what he saw made absolutely no sense. Sophie was sitting on the floor next to a cleaning cart, talking animatedly to a woman in a gray janitor's uniform. The woman was older, maybe in her early 40s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was clean but worn, and she was holding a mop in one hand while listening intently to his daughter. Sophie was showing her a drawing, explaining every detail with excitement he hadn't seen in years. The woman was nodding, asking questions, genuinely engaged, and Sophie was glowing. Daniel stood frozen, completely thrown off balance. This wasn't part of his plan. This wasn't what he'd imagined at all. In all his careful strategizing and all his networking at fancy school events, he'd never once noticed the cleaning staff. They were invisible to him, just part of the background. But to Sophie, this woman wasn't invisible at all. She was someone who made her laugh. Daniel cleared his throat, and both Sophie and the woman looked up. His daughter's face immediately closed off, the brightness fading from her eyes like someone had flipped a switch. It hurt more than he wanted to admit. "Daddy," Sophie said quietly, standing up and brushing off her school uniform. "I was just waiting for you." The woman in the janitor's uniform quickly stood as well, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Cooper, I didn't mean to keep her. We were just chatting while I cleaned the classroom." "It's fine," Daniel said, though his mind was racing. "Come on, Sophie. Let's go home." In the car, he tried to act casual. "So who was that lady you were talking to?" "Rosa," Sophie said, looking out the window. "She cleans our classroom." "You two seem to be having a nice conversation." Sophie just shrugged, and that was the end of that. They drove home in silence, but Daniel couldn't stop thinking about what he'd witnessed. That laugh, that genuine joy in his daughter's face. It had been there, real and bright, until he'd walked in. Over the weekend, he tried to put it out of his mind. He took Sophie to the aquarium, then to her favorite ice cream place. She was pleasant enough, saying thank you and smiling when appropriate, but it was all surface level. Nothing like the animated excitement he'd seen in that classroom. Monday came, and Daniel dropped Sophie off at school before heading to his office. But he couldn't concentrate. He kept seeing that image of his daughter sitting on the floor, laughing with the janitor. By lunchtime, he'd made a decision. He needed to understand what was happening. Tuesday evening, he told Sophie he'd pick her up a bit late because of a meeting. He wanted to see if she'd seek out Rosa again. Sure enough, when he arrived at school around 5:30, he found Sophie in the same classroom, sitting at a desk while Rosa cleaned around her. This time, he stayed in the hallway just out of sight, watching through the door's window. Rosa was wiping down desks, moving methodically through the room. Sophie was supposedly doing homework, but mostly she was talking. Really talking, the way kids do when they feel safe and comfortable. And then my friend Katie said her mom makes the best chocolate chip cookies. But I told her my mom used to make even better ones, Sophie was saying. She'd let me help measure the ingredients and everything. Daniel's chest tightened. Sophie rarely talked about her mother anymore. Rosa paused in her cleaning and sat down on one of the student chairs. "That sounds like a beautiful memory. What else did you two like to do together?" "We'd read books before bed." She did all the different voices for the characters. It was so funny. Sophie smiled, a real smile. Do you have kids? I have a daughter, Rosa said warmly. She's all grown up now, studying at a university in another country. I miss her every single day, but I'm so proud of her. Don't you get lonely? Sophie asked. Sometimes, Rosa admitted. But then I come here and meet wonderful kids like you, and that helps. They continued talking while Rosa finished cleaning. She told Sophie about growing up in a different country, about the foods her grandmother used to make, about the stray cat that lived near her apartment building. Simple stories, nothing fancy, but Sophie hung on every word. When Rosa was done, she packed up her cart. Same time Thursday? She asked with a warm smile. Sophie nodded eagerly. I'll be here. Daniel quickly walked away before they could spot him. His mind was spinning during the entire drive home. This had been going on for a while, clearly. This wasn't a one-time thing. Sophie had been deliberately staying late to spend time with the janitor. Part of him wanted to put a stop to it immediately. This wasn't appropriate, was it? His daughter befriending the cleaning staff? What would people think? But then he remembered that laugh, that genuine happiness, and the words died in his throat. Over the next few weeks, Daniel found himself playing detective. He learned that Sophie had started this routine about 2 months ago, right around the time he'd begun his campaign to meet suitable women at the school. While he'd been networking at fancy fundraisers, his daughter had been finding her own solution to her loneliness. He discovered that Sophie would volunteer to help the teacher with after-school tasks just so she could stay late. She'd organize books, clean the whiteboard, anything to have an excuse to be there when Rosa came to clean. And every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, they'd spend about 30 minutes together. Daniel started arriving early for pickup, parking where he could see the classroom window. He watched them interact, studied how his daughter came alive in those moments. Rosa never seemed rushed or distracted. She gave Sophie her full attention, asked real questions, listened to the answers like they mattered. One evening, he saw Rosa showing Sophie how to fold a paper flower. His daughter's face was scrunched up in concentration, her tongue poking out slightly the way it used to when she was younger, and trying something new. When she finally got it right, Rosa clapped and cheered like Sophie had won an Olympic medal. Sophie beamed with pride. Another time he watched Rosa braiding Sophie's hair while his daughter chatted away. It was such a simple, maternal gesture, but it hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. When was the last time someone had braided his daughter's hair? The nannies kept it neat and tidy, sure, but there was something different about this, something tender and personal. He began to notice other changes in Sophie too. She started humming while doing homework, little tunes he didn't recognize. When he asked about them, she said they were songs Rosa taught her from her childhood. Sophie began drawing more, filling pages with colorful pictures. Most of them featured 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, both smiling. Who's that? Daniel asked one evening, pointing at the drawings. That's me and Rosa, Sophie said simply, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Daniel decided he needed to know more about this woman who'd somehow reached his daughter when everyone else had failed. He made some discreet inquiries with the school administration, keeping it casual and friendly. Oh, Rosa Martinez, the school secretary said. She's wonderful. Been with us for about 2 years now. Always on time, does excellent work, very reliable. Has she been here long? In the country, I mean. I think she moved here about 5 years ago. She's a widow, if I remember correctly. Her husband passed away shortly after they arrived. Such a sad story. Daniel felt a pang of something. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. They'd both lost their partners. They both understood that particular kind of pain. He learned more over the following days. Rosa worked 2 jobs, the evening shift at the school and weekend mornings at an office building downtown. She lived in a small apartment in one of the older neighborhoods. She sent money back home to support her daughter's education abroad. Everything he learned painted a picture of someone hardworking, dedicated, and genuine. But she was still the janitor. She wasn't educated at prestigious universities. She didn't move in his social circles. She didn't fit any of the criteria he'd established for the kind of person he'd imagined helping raise his daughter. Yet Sophie had chosen her. Without any input from him, without any of his careful planning and vetting, his daughter had found exactly what she needed in the most unexpected place. One Thursday evening, Daniel decided to actually talk to Rosa instead of just watching from a distance. He walked into the classroom where Sophie was helping Rosa wipe down the whiteboard. "Mr. Cooper," Rosa said, immediately looking worried. "Is something wrong? Is Sophie in trouble?" No, nothing like that," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted to thank you for being so kind to my daughter." Rosa relaxed slightly. "Sophie is a wonderful child. It's my pleasure to spend time with her." "She talks about you at home," Daniel admitted. "A lot, actually." Sophie's face turned red. "Daddy!" Rosa smiled warmly at her. "Well, I talk about you too. I tell my daughter about this smart, funny girl I met who loves to read and draw." Daniel found himself studying Rosa more carefully. She had tired eyes, the kind that came from working too hard and sleeping too little. Her hands were rough from years of manual labor. But there was something in her smile, something genuine and warm that made him understand why Sophie was drawn to her. "Would you?" He hesitated, not quite believing what he was about to say. "Would you like to have coffee sometime? I'd love to hear more about your conversations with Sophie." Rosa looked surprised, then cautious. "I don't want to overstep, Mr. Cooper. I know I'm just the cleaning lady." "You're not just anything," he said, and meant it. "You're someone who makes my daughter happy. That makes you very important." Rosa glanced at Sophie, who was watching them both with wide, hopeful eyes. "Well, if it's okay with you, then yes. I'd like that." They exchanged phone numbers, and Daniel left with Sophie, who couldn't stop smiling the entire way home. That night, she actually told him about her day without him having to pry. She talked about her classes, her friends, something funny that happened at lunch. It was the most she'd said in 3 years, and Daniel realized something that made him both uncomfortable and hopeful. His carefully laid plans hadn't worked. His networking at fancy events hadn't helped. But somehow his daughter had found exactly what she needed all on her own. The question now was what he was going to do about it. Daniel met Rosa for coffee on a Saturday morning at a small cafe near the school. He'd suggested a fancier place downtown, but she'd politely asked if they could meet somewhere in her neighborhood instead. She had to work a shift at noon and didn't want to be late. He arrived first, feeling oddly nervous. This wasn't a business meeting or a date. He wasn't sure what it was exactly. He just knew that this woman had somehow unlocked something in his daughter that he'd thought was lost forever. Rosa arrived right on time, wearing jeans and a simple sweater. She looked different out of her work uniform, younger somehow, though the tiredness was still there in her eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," Daniel said as they sat down with their coffee. "Of course," Rosa replied, wrapping her hands around her cup. "Though I have to admit I'm a bit confused about what this is about." Daniel took a breath. "My daughter hasn't been herself since her mother died 3 years ago. We've tried everything. Therapy, counseling, different nannies, special activities. Nothing helped. She just kept getting quieter and more withdrawn." He paused. "Until you." Rosa's expression softened. "She's told me a bit about her mother. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Daniel stirred his coffee, gathering his thoughts. "I need to understand what you're doing differently. How did you reach her when nobody else could?" Rosa was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I don't think I did anything special, honestly. I just listened to her. Really listened. Kids know when you're actually paying attention versus just going through the motions. But it's more than that," Daniel pressed. "She lights up around you." She laughs again. "She tells me about your conversations. You've brought her back to life somehow." "Maybe," Rosa said carefully. "It's because I don't expect anything from her. I'm not trying to fix her or change her or make her feel a certain way. I just let her be whoever she needs to be in that moment." Daniel realized she was right. Every nanny, every tutor, every therapist had come with an agenda. Help Sophie with her grief. Get her to open up. Make her feel better. But Rosa just existed alongside her, sharing stories and folding paper flowers and braiding hair. No pressure. No expectations. Just presence. "Can I ask you something?" Rosa said, looking at him with those tired but kind eyes. "Why are you at the school so much lately? The other janitors have mentioned seeing you at all the events." Daniel felt embarrassed. "I was trying to find someone appropriate to be in Sophie's life. A woman who could be a mother figure to her." The words sounded ridiculous out loud. "I thought if I met the right person, educated and sophisticated, someone from my world, it would help Sophie." Rosa was quiet, then smiled gently. "And what does Sophie think about these women you've been meeting?" She's not interested in any of them, Daniel admitted. She barely acknowledges they exist. Because you chose them, Rosa said simply. Not her. The truth of that statement hit him hard. He'd been so focused on finding someone who met his criteria, someone who fit into his life, that he'd never considered what Sophie actually needed. And Sophie had gone out and found it herself. They talked for another hour. Rosa told him about her life, about losing her husband to a sudden heart attack just months after they'd moved to the country chasing better opportunities, about working multiple jobs to support her daughter's education, about the loneliness of being in a foreign place without family or friends. Some nights I go home and I'm so tired I can barely stand, she said, but then I think about my daughter and what she's accomplishing, and it makes it all worth it. Just like I'm sure everything you do is worth it when you see Sophie happy. Daniel found himself sharing things he rarely talked about. The guilt he felt about not being there when his wife got sick. The helplessness of watching Sophie withdraw. The fear that he was failing as a father. You're not failing, Rosa said firmly. You're here, aren't you? You're trying. That's what matters. When they parted ways, Daniel felt different somehow. Lighter, maybe. Or just less alone. Over the next few weeks, he started joining Sophie for her Tuesday and Thursday sessions with Rosa. At first, he just sat quietly while they talked and drew pictures. Then gradually he started participating. Rosa taught them both how to make paper cranes. She shared stories from her childhood that had all three of them laughing. She asked Daniel about his work, genuinely curious, and seemed impressed by his achievements without being intimidated by them. Sophie was thriving. She started inviting school friends over to the house for the first time in years. Her teachers reported that she was more engaged in class, raising her hand and participating in discussions. She even tried out for the school play. Daniel's sister Rebecca noticed the change immediately when she came to visit. What happened? She asked, watching Sophie practice her lines for the play in the living room. She's like a different child. She met someone, Daniel said. Someone who reminded her how to be happy. One of those women you've been meeting at school events? Not exactly. Daniel told her about Rosa, watching his sister's face carefully for her reaction. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. The janitor? Yes, and Sophie loves her? More than I've seen her love anyone since her mother. Rebecca looked at her niece, then back at her brother. Then that's all that matters, isn't it? But Daniel knew it wasn't that simple. He was a billionaire. Rosa cleaned floors for a living. They came from completely different worlds. What would people say? His business associates, his friends, the other parents at Sophie's school? He hated himself for even thinking those things. Since when did he care what other people thought? He'd built his company from nothing, taking risks everyone said would fail. He'd never let other people's opinions dictate his choices before, yet here he was, hesitating. One evening, he invited Rosa to dinner at their apartment. Sophie was ecstatic, spending hours choosing what to wear and helping their housekeeper prepare the meal. When Rosa arrived carrying a simple bouquet of flowers from a street vendor, Sophie practically tackled her with a hug. Welcome to our home, Daniel said, feeling strangely nervous in his own space. Rosa looked around at the expensive furnishings, the original artwork on the walls, the floor-to-ceiling windows with their stunning view. You have a beautiful home, she said, but there was something in her voice. Not envy exactly. Maybe sadness. Dinner was wonderful. Rosa complimented the food and asked the housekeeper for recipes. She admired Sophie's room, looking at every drawing and craft project with genuine interest. She fit into their evening so naturally it was almost scary. After Sophie went to bed, Daniel and Rosa sat in the living room with tea. The city lights sparkled below them. This is a lot, Rosa said quietly, looking out the window. What is? All of this. Your world. It's so different from mine. Daniel moved closer. Does it have to be? Different, I mean. Can't we just be two people who care about the same little girl? Rosa turned to look at him and he saw fear in her eyes. Mr. Cooper, Daniel, I need to be honest with you. I know what you're thinking. I know what Sophie wants. But I can't be what you need. What do you think I need? Someone from your world. Someone educated and polished who knows how to navigate your life. I'm a cleaning lady who barely finished high school back home. I work 2 jobs just to make rent. I don't go to fancy restaurants or know which fork to use at formal dinners. I can't be the sophisticated stepmother Sophie deserves. Sophie doesn't need sophisticated, Daniel said. She needs someone who loves her. Someone real and genuine who makes her feel safe. Someone exactly like you. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. But what about you? What do you need? The question hung in the air between them. Daniel realized he'd been asking himself the same thing for weeks now. He'd started this whole mission looking for someone appropriate, someone suitable, someone who checked all his boxes. Someone he could introduce to his business associates without embarrassment. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. He'd started looking forward to those Tuesday and Thursday evenings. He'd found himself thinking about Rosa's stories during boring meetings. He'd caught himself smiling at the memory of her teaching Sophie to braid hair. I need someone who makes my daughter laugh, he said slowly. I need someone who reminds me that there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins. I need someone who's been through darkness and found a way to keep shining anyway. He paused. I need someone exactly like you. Rosa wiped her eyes. This is crazy. You know that, right? You're a billionaire. I clean toilets for a living. And somehow that doesn't seem to matter, Daniel said. Not when Sophie is happy. Not when I'm happy. Not when everything finally feels right again. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in thought. Outside, the city pulsed with life, millions of people living their own complicated stories. I'm scared, Rosa finally whispered. Scared of what people will say. Scared that I'll mess this up. Scared that I'm not enough. Daniel took her hand, rough and calloused from years of hard work. I'm scared too. Scared of what I'm feeling. Scared of moving forward. Scared of staying stuck where I am. He squeezed her hand gently. But maybe being scared together is better than being scared alone. Rosa smiled through her tears. Sophie would love that we're both scared. She'd probably tell us to stop being silly and just be happy. She's smarter than both of us, Daniel agreed. The next morning, Daniel did something he wasn't proud of. He had his assistant run a complete background check on Rosa. He told himself it was responsible parenting, due diligence, protecting Sophie. But deep down, he knew he was looking for something. Either proof that Rosa was genuine or evidence that she was after his money. The report came back 3 days later. Daniel read it alone in his office, feeling increasingly ashamed with each page. Rosa Martinez, age 42. Immigrated 5 years ago with her husband and daughter. Her husband, a former construction worker, had died of a sudden heart attack 6 months after their arrival. No life insurance. Rosa had been forced to sell their car and most of their possessions to pay for the funeral and outstanding debts. Before immigrating, she'd run a small cleaning business back home. Successful. With 3 employees and a steady client base, she'd sold it all to fund their move, believing in promises of better opportunities. After her husband's death, she'd taken any work she could find. Cleaning houses, working in restaurants, eventually landing the evening janitorial position at Riverside Academy. The weekend job at the office building came later, when her daughter got accepted to university abroad and needed tuition money. The report showed her bank statements. Every month, like clockwork, she sent most of her paycheck overseas. She lived in a studio apartment in one of the cheaper neighborhoods. Her rent was paid on time every time. No debt, no credit card, no luxury purchases. Just work, bills and money sent home to her daughter. There was a note from the investigator at the bottom. Subject has never inquired about Daniel Cooper's net worth or business interests. Has never mentioned him by name to coworkers or neighbors. Has never attempted to leverage relationship with his daughter for personal gain. All evidence suggests genuine friendship with child. No ulterior motives detected. Daniel closed the folder and put his head in his hands. What kind of person was he? Rosa had shown his daughter nothing but kindness, had asked for nothing in return, and here he was investigating her like she was some kind of criminal. He was becoming the villain in his own story. That evening he went to the school early. He found Rosa in the cafeteria, mopping the floors after the last after-school program had ended. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, and he felt even worse. Sophie's not here yet, she said. She had chess club today. Should be done in about 20 minutes. Actually, I came to see you, Daniel said. Can we talk? Rosa leaned on her mop, looking concerned. Is everything okay? I did something terrible, he admitted. I had someone investigate you. A background check. I read about your finances, your work history, everything. Rosa's face went carefully blank. She set down the mop and crossed her arms. I see. I'm so sorry. It was wrong and invasive and I had no right. Why did you do it? Her voice was controlled, but he could hear the hurt underneath. Because I'm a coward, Daniel said honestly. Because I've been burned before by people who pretended to care, but really just wanted access to my money. Because I was scared that this you and Sophie was too good to be true. And what did you find? Rosa asked, her chin up, defiant. I found out that you're exactly who you appear to be. Someone hardworking and honest who's doing her best in difficult circumstances. Someone who gives everything for her daughter and expects nothing in return. He paused. I found out that I don't deserve you, but Sophie probably does. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her mop and went back to cleaning. I appreciate your honesty, but I need to think about this. Of course. I understand. Do you? She stopped mopping and looked at him. Do you understand what it's like to be investigated like you're a suspect? To have your privacy invaded because someone with money and power decided they had the right? No, Daniel admitted. I don't, and I'm truly sorry. I'm not after your money, Rosa said, her voice shaking slightly. I never asked Sophie about your house or your cars or your company. I don't want anything from you except to spend time with a sweet little girl who reminds me of my own daughter at that age. I know that now. I think I knew it before, but I let fear get in the way. Rosa went back to mopping, moving with sharp, angry movements. Daniel stood there, not sure if he should leave or stay. Finally, she spoke again. My husband and I had nothing when we came here, just dreams and hope in each other. We were going to build a life, start over, give our daughter opportunities we never had. Her voice cracked. And then he died, and I was alone in a strange country with bills I couldn't pay and a daughter counting on me. Rosa, I'm so sorry. I've had people look down on me because of my job. I've had people treat me like I'm invisible, like I'm less than human because I clean their messes. But you, she looked at him with tears in her eyes. You made me feel like maybe I was more than just the cleaning lady. And then you did this. Daniel felt about 2 inches tall. You're right. I was wrong. I let my past experiences and my prejudices cloud my judgment. I treated you like everyone else has treated you, and that's unforgivable. I need time, Rosa said. I need to figure out if I can trust you. If this, whatever this is worth the risk. Take all the time you need, Daniel said. I'll wait. Over the next 2 weeks, things were strained. Rosa still met with Sophie on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but she was cool and distant with Daniel. Sophie noticed immediately. Why isn't Rosa talking to you anymore? She asked one evening at dinner. I made a mistake, Daniel said honestly. He'd learned that Sophie deserved the truth. I did something that hurt her feelings, and now she's upset with me. Did you say sorry? I did, but sometimes sorry isn't enough. Sometimes people need time to heal. Sophie thought about this, pushing her vegetables around her plate. You should show her you're sorry, not just say it. How do I do that? I don't know, Sophie said with the wisdom of a 7-year-old. But you're smart. You'll figure it out. Daniel thought about it for days. How do you show someone you respect them when you've violated their privacy? How do you prove you see them as more than just their job when you've literally had them investigated like a potential threat? Then it hit him. He'd been thinking about this all wrong. He'd been approaching Rosa the same way he approached everything else in his life, from a position of power and resources. But that was exactly the problem. He needed to meet her on equal ground. The next Saturday morning, Daniel showed up at the office building where Rosa worked her weekend shift. He was wearing jeans and an old t-shirt, the most casual clothes he owned. He carried a bucket, cleaning supplies, and a lot of hope. Rosa looked up from vacuuming the lobby, her eyes widening in surprise. What are you doing here? I'm here to help you clean, Daniel said. If you'll let me. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You work 2 jobs. That's exhausting. I have nothing but free time on the weekends. Let me help. Rosa stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You're a billionaire. You don't clean office buildings. I'm just a person, Daniel said. And I'm trying to show you that I see you as a person too. Not just someone who works for me or could work for me. I see you as Rosa, someone who works incredibly hard, who deserves help, who deserves respect. This is crazy, Rosa said. But there was a hint of a smile on her face. Maybe. But it's also honest. No games, no power plays, no background checks. Just me helping you because I want to. Rosa hesitated, then handed him a spray bottle and a cloth. The windows on the third floor need cleaning. Think you can handle that? I'll do my best. Daniel spent the next 4 hours learning just how physically demanding Rosa's job was. His back ached from bending over. His arms were sore from scrubbing. His expensive watch got splashed with cleaning solution, and he'd never felt more satisfied with a day's work in his life. Rosa watched him struggle with a mixture of amusement and something else. Respect, maybe, or at least a softening of her anger. During their lunch break, sitting on the floor of an empty office eating sandwiches from a vending machine, she finally spoke. "Why are you really doing this?" "Because you were right," Daniel said. "I've been treating you like you're less than me because of your job. I needed to understand what your life is actually like. Not read about it in a report, but experience it. And I'm exhausted, and I have new respect for how hard you work. And I'm even more convinced that Sophie was right to choose you." Rosa was quiet, eating her sandwich. Then she said, "I looked you up online. After you told me about the background check, fair enough. You've given millions to charity. You've funded scholarships in hospitals and community centers. You're not a bad person, Daniel. You're just someone who's used to protecting what's his. That doesn't excuse what I did." "No," she agreed, "but it helps me understand it. You were scared." "I get that. I'm scared too." They finished their sandwiches in companionable silence. Then Rosa stood up and offered him her hand. "Come on. Those bathrooms on the 4th floor won't clean themselves." Daniel groaned but took her hand, letting her pull him to his feet. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Maybe a little," Rosa admitted with a grin. "It's not every day I get to boss around a billionaire." They finished the shift together, and Daniel came back the next weekend, and the one after that. Word got around among the other janitors. Some thought it was weird. Others thought it was sweet. Rosa just let him help, and Sophie's words hung in the air like a challenge. After she went to bed that evening, Daniel and Rosa sat on the couch, both carefully not looking at each other. "She's young," Rosa finally said. "She doesn't understand how complicated things are. Or maybe she understands better than we do," Daniel replied. "Kids see things simply. They don't worry about what people think or whether something makes sense on paper. They just know what feels right. And this feels right to you? A billionaire and a janitor?" Daniel turned to face her. "Stop calling yourself that. You're not just a janitor. You're a mother who sacrificed everything for her daughter. You're a widow who survived losing everything and rebuilt a life from nothing. You're the person who brought light back into my daughter's eyes when everyone else failed. That's who you are." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what it's like, Daniel. People already whisper when they see us together at school. I hear what they say. They think I'm after your money. They think I'm some kind of gold digger who's using Sophie to get to you. Let them think whatever they want. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're calling names." Daniel took her hand. "Then let me make it clear to everyone that you're not after anything. That I'm the one pursuing you. That if anyone has an agenda here, it's me." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere between watching you fold paper flowers and helping you clean windows, I fell for you. I'm saying that Sophie isn't the only one who wants you in our lives permanently. I'm saying that I love you, Rosa." Rosa pulled her hand away, standing up and walking to the window. "You don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love that I make Sophie happy. But you don't really know me. Then let me know you. Let me learn every part of you. The good, the bad, the complicated. I want all of it. What about your business associates? Your friends? What will they say when you show up to fancy events with a cleaning lady on your arm?" "They'll say I'm the luckiest man alive," Daniel said, standing and walking over to her. "And if they don't, then they're not really my friends." Rosa shook her head. "You're not thinking clearly. This is gratitude, not love. Sophie is happy and you're grateful to me for that. But that's not enough to build a life on." "You're wrong," Daniel said softly. "I am grateful. But I also admire you. I respect you. I think about you constantly. I look forward to seeing you. I want to know about your day and hear your stories and share my life with you. If that's not love, then I don't know what is." Rosa turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm scared, Daniel. I'm terrified. What if this doesn't work? What if we try and fail? Sophie has already lost one mother. I can't bear the thought of disappointing her. Then we won't fail. We'll work at it every single day. We'll communicate and compromise and figure it out together. That's what relationships are. It's not that simple." "No," Daniel agreed. "It's not. But nothing worth having ever is." They stood there in the quiet apartment, the city lights twinkling below them, both scared and hopeful and uncertain about the future. The next few weeks were a strange dance of moving forward and pulling back. Daniel introduced Rosa to his sister Rebecca, who immediately loved her. They had dinner together a few times, always with Sophie present. They went to the park, to museums, to Sophie's school play where both of them cheered loudly from the audience, but they didn't define what they were doing. They didn't put labels on their relationship. They just existed together, day by day, building something neither of them fully understood yet. The turning point came at the school's annual holiday celebration. It was a big event, with all the parents and teachers and staff invited. Daniel had bought tickets weeks ago, back when he was still trying to network with the right people. He asked Rosa if she'd go with him as his date. She hesitated for a long time before saying yes. The night of the event, Daniel picked Rosa up from her apartment. She opened the door wearing a simple black dress, nothing fancy or expensive, but she looked beautiful. More than that, she looked nervous. "We don't have to do this," Daniel said. "We can skip it, go get pizza with Sophie instead." "No," Rosa said, squaring her shoulders. "I'm tired of hiding. Tired of feeling like I'm not good enough. If we're going to do this, really do this, then we need to be honest about it." The holiday celebration was held in the school's gymnasium, decorated with twinkling lights and festive decorations. Daniel walked in with Rosa on his arm, and he felt the shift in the room immediately. Conversations paused. People stared. Whispers started. He kept his head high and his hand firmly on Rosa's back. They found Sophie, who squealed with delight at seeing Rosa in a dress. "You look like a princess," Sophie declared. "You look pretty beautiful yourself," Rosa said, admiring Sophie's red velvet dress. Throughout the evening, Daniel introduced Rosa to everyone, not as the janitor or Sophie's friend, but simply as Rosa, my girlfriend. Some people were polite but distant. Others were genuinely warm. A few were obviously judgmental, their expressions saying everything their words didn't. Daniel didn't care. He kept Rosa close, made sure she never felt alone or uncomfortable. He watched her chat with other parents, share stories with teachers, laugh at the principal's jokes. She belonged here just as much as anyone else. Then came the moment that changed everything. The school principal got up to make announcements and thank various people for their contributions to the school. She thanked the PTA, the teachers, the volunteers. Then she said something unexpected. "I also want to take a moment to recognize our evening janitorial staff. They work when our students are gone. But their contribution to keeping our school clean and safe is invaluable. Many of them have worked here for years, and we're grateful for their dedication." A smattering of polite applause. Some of the janitors were there, standing along the back wall in their work uniforms, having come in on their night off. They looked uncomfortable with the attention. Then Sophie did something that made Daniel's heart swell with pride. She walked up to the principal and tugged on her sleeve, whispering something. The principal smiled and handed her the microphone. "Hi, everyone," Sophie said, her small voice amplified through the speakers. "I'm Sophie Cooper, and I wanted to say something about Miss Rosa." Rosa went pale. Daniel put his arm around her shoulders. "Miss Rosa is the janitor who cleans my classroom," Sophie continued. "But she's also my best friend. She taught me how to make paper flowers and how to braid hair. She listens to my stories and tells me about her daughter. She makes me laugh when I'm sad. She's the best person I know, and I love her very much." Sophie paused, looking directly at her father and Rosa. "My mommy died 3 years ago, and I thought I would never be happy again. But Miss Rosa helped me remember how. She didn't try to replace my mommy. She just loved me for who I am, and I think that's pretty special." The room was completely silent. Then one person started clapping. Then another. Soon the entire gymnasium was applauding, and Rosa was crying, and Daniel was holding her while Sophie ran back to them, beaming with pride. After that, something shifted. Oh, there were still people who whispered and judged. There probably always would be. But it didn't matter anymore. Sophie had made it clear where she stood, and that gave Daniel and Rosa the courage to do the same. Over the next few months, they built a life together. Rosa met Daniel's business associates, and while some were snobbish, others were impressed by her intelligence and warmth. Daniel met Rosa's daughter through video calls and immediately understood where Rosa got her strength from. They didn't rush things. Rosa kept her apartment and her jobs, refusing to let Daniel sweep in and rescue her. She needed to maintain her independence, to know she could still take care of herself. Daniel respected that even when he wanted to make things easier for her. They had their first fight about money. Daniel wanted to pay off Rosa's debts and set up a fund for her daughter's education. Rosa refused, saying she'd earned her way her whole life and wasn't about to stop now. They compromised. He could help with her daughter's education, but Rosa would pay him back over time. They had their second fight when Daniel's mother came to visit and made a snide comment about Rosa's background. Daniel stood up for Rosa, but Rosa stood up for herself even better, calmly and firmly explaining that she didn't need anyone's approval but her own. They laughed together. They cried together. They learned each other's quirks and habits. They built something real and solid and true. 6 months after that holiday celebration, Daniel took both Rosa and Sophie to the school library. It was evening, after hours, when the building was quiet and empty. He'd arranged it with the principal. "Why are we here?" Rosa asked, confused. "Because this is where everything started," Daniel said. "This is where I first saw you with Sophie, where I realized my daughter had been smarter than me all along." He got down on one knee, pulling out a simple but elegant ring. Sophie stood beside him, practically bouncing with excitement. "Rosa Martinez, you came into our lives when we needed you most. You didn't try to fix us or change us. You just loved us exactly as we were. You taught me that real value isn't measured in money or status, but in kindness and authenticity and the courage to love despite fear." Rosa's hands were over her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "I'm not asking you to be Sophie's replacement mother. I'm not asking